Psychological safety for me personally is being able to bring your authentic self, authentic voice into the work that you're doing, and also to be able to decipher what's really directly in front of you, from the goals of the project and the company to your own personal goals.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Galen Low with the Digital Project Manager. We're a community of digital professionals on a mission to help each other get skilled, get confident, and get connected so that we can help deliver projects better. If you want to hear more about that, head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Hey everyone, thanks for hanging out with us on the DPM podcast. My guest today is someone who has devoted herself to helping others, to removing shame, and empowering people to take risks beyond their comfort zone. Built from equal parts project delivery leader and crafty improv teacher, she has championed diversity and inclusion for her teams as well as her clients by creating psychological safety for anyone involved in her projects. Beyond project delivery, she also helps organizations shape and implement solid diversity and inclusion programs, co-hosts a mental wellness podcast called But Have You Considered Therapy?, and teaches improv classes for youth with special needs. And if that wasn't enough, she is also a serial crafter and a very talented cake decorator. Today she's going to be teaching us how embracing failure can be the key to unlocking innovation, as well as her top tactics for creating a psychologically safe environment when working in person or virtually. Folks, please welcome Samantha Schak. Hello, Samantha.
Hello, May. My goodness, that was quite an intro. Thank you so much, Galen. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
It's great to have you on the show. I've been dying to have you on the show for quite some time, and I'm also really excited that you've joined the DPM expert team. It's great to have your knowledge on tap. It's great to have your voice in the conversation, and I love what you do. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, me too. We had such a great AMA a couple weeks ago, so I'm excited to talk to a wider audience about this important topic, and will stay an important topic forever. I know we've learned a whole lot of lessons for it in the last year, but really excited to chat with you today.
Absolutely. And yes, it's been an interesting time. I mean, even where you are in Austin, you're coming out of a bit of a turbulent time. There was a rare snowstorm that wreaked a bit of havoc amidst a pandemic, but it seems that things are recovering, and there's even been some loosening of restrictions happening over there in Texas. So I'm just wondering, how is your life different today than it was just a few weeks ago?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. To my dismay, loosening of restrictions. So Austin is trying to keep our, mask mandates and a little bit less capacity. But you know what? It's up to the big dogs, I guess, living in Texas. So today my life is extremely different. So we went through quite a bit of trauma in the beginning. I mean, this whole year, 2021, just in and of itself, starting with an insurrection and going into a whole lot of chaos, and now this with inclement weather happening. Mm-hmm. And it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I'm from Chicago, so I've seen a lot of snow and been in that a whole lot. But it was definitely a very, very scary time, and trying to work through it, keep children functioning and safe, and also and then the usual pandemic, right, overseeing all of it too. So I'm finding myself extremely exhausted in the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to be very gentle with myself, and I follow a lot of mental health professionals and counselors on Twitter and Instagram by design, so I can get those messages that, hey, it's okay to be exhausted right now, and you're never functioning at 100% this year, but especially right now. So definitely just trying to give myself some grace and gentleness right now.
Awesome, definitely. And how about distractions? Do you have any sort of favorite distractions that have been sort of taking you to a happier place overall throughout all this turbulence?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to give it up for my favorite thing ever, which is TikTok. And I know I was just the, grudging millennial that was attached to Vine, and then became such a TikTok advocate over the last year. I even put it in some branding presentations for project managers because I follow a whole lot within that. And TikTok actually inspired me to create PM with a Purpose, which is my, blog for project managers. So So I would say that's just for pure entertainment, empowerment, a lot of tough conversations, a lot of good D&I representatives there. Definitely my favorite distraction.
I love that. I definitely need to get more into that. It's sort of got this reputation of just being about, choreographed dances in my head. Clearly, that's not only what it's about.
No, the algorithm, trust the algorithms. You just got to start liking things and following things. And I actually think that TikTok diagnoses as well. So it's like, I told my therapist, I said, TikTok thinks I have ADHD. And she was like, well, you could. And so like, you know what? It's been definitely a good supplement for me in helping me, push through a lot of issues.
I like that. Diagnosis through TikTok. That's the next foray.
I'm serious. People, discover, sexualities. Like there's a whole lot of like hot topics that people get into and they're like, oh, the algorithms, this is what it's giving me now. So very powerful data coming your way.
Really, really cool. Awesome. All right, let's dive in. I wondered if maybe we could start out by having you give us a little bit of an overview of like the professional version of you, where you've been, things you've done, what you like to do, and what the future holds.
Yeah. I would say I am a serial agency hopper right now as a project manager. Just worked my way up from getting into more of the sales and marketing role and then fell into project management, much like most people do and not realizing it's a discipline. And so I've worked on multitude of types of projects and clients and got my certified Scrum product ownership a couple of years ago, which I really liked and been putting into practice more recently as a strategist at an agency called DockYard, which is a fully remote team. So yeah, that's a little, kind of my my baseline of who I am and getting, just seeing exactly what that means for me. Been, dabbling into culture and diversity inclusion panels within my companies and task force, things like that. So really trying to bring it into my everyday work. And yeah, so just, yeah. Sorry, now I feel like I'm this is rambling now.
No, it's good. I really like the layering. I like that, the sort of overall agency background, but that you're actually doing more with your role too, just in terms of diversity and inclusion, which we're going to dive into quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite types of projects?
Favorite types of projects. So we've been modeling off of like these like larger discovery programs where I get to do a whole lot of anything where I can dive into a lot of research and design. That's where I love to lend a helping hand or direct in, figuring out what are we really trying to do and why. And those are the projects that I love because those are the surprises, because you think you go into it with one potential solution, but you come out with a multitude of others. Then many you had no idea, didn't think of, a lot of blue sky ideas. And so those are things where I love to just, foster within a team for us to get into some like creative solutioning and surprising the clients too. And sometimes it's things that they don't want to hear. So how do we, cast that message across?
I love that, the excitement of the creative process. And yeah, you might not end up with the thing that you thought you were going to end up with.
Yeah. It rarely ever happens, right? So you might as well embrace it and get really good at it.
Absolutely. The one thing that I feel like you've managed to do, as I was kind of learning more about you, I feel like you've managed to incorporate a lot of things that you're passionate about into like one thing and what you do as a project manager and as a consultant. I'm just wondering, was that deliberate? Did you kind of sit down and go, okay, I like all of these different things. How can I find a point where they intersect and sort of work that into my process?
Yeah, that's such a great question. A lot of times I couldn't really see, I had two worlds kind of coming together at the same time. So I started improv and improv teaching around the same time that I discovered project management. And you might not think, for one, that's very creative and, unstructured by design. And for this other side of me that was literally trying to create structure and stick to it, I was starting to see some overlap happening as I, both got farther in my career in project management as well as improv, and was starting to see some themes start to come together. The first one I know that we're going to get into today is failure and how to embrace that and what that means on the stage, and then what that means in projects, and really facilitating safety so that you can take risks. And that's like when you see an improv group that's been together for a long time and you feel like it's scripted, like that happens so often. It's because that team has so much trust built in and safety that they can go off of the beaten path and go into an entirely different world and create something together and collaborate. And that's really what we're doing when we're creating projects or any type of, product that we're trying to ship. So really I was starting to see that there was actually so many overlaps and that I could start to incorporate that into my work. And it brought something also different to a company. So I was able to stand out more, start to realize what a personal brand is and cultivate that. And then also just, be the go-to person to say, hey, we need someone to facilitate something or to create a workshop. So that's where I started to really find a niche.
Very cool. I really think that's like the push-pull of, yes, being that sort of control freak project manager versus, okay, suddenly you have to be a bench in the skit. Okay, be a bench. Are like diametrically opposed. But if you can kind of find that balancing point, then I 100% agree. I think, having that team trust and having everyone feel comfortable to work together and be a bench or deliver amazing digital products is kind of the same thing. That's really exciting. I have always admired that blend. So that's really cool to kind of understand that.
Structure creates safety, right? And so does flexibility, because you know that you can get away. If that structure is not working for you, then, let's move in another direction. But if you're just completely without structure, you have no idea where you're going, right? So really, like you said, it's finding that perfect balance.
100%. Awesome. Let's give our listeners their bearings. So you described yourself as a project lead who focuses specifically on making an inclusive space to uphold the psychological safety of everyone and anyone involved in your project decisions, anyone who may be affected by the project, all the stakeholders, all the team members, clients. So just to get us all on the same page, how do you define psychological safety and why is it important?
Yeah, it's a big question. I actually bookmarked. Somebody asked on Twitter a couple months ago, what is psychological safety? And there's so many great answers to it and such a great, amount of what people interpret it to be. And this is like my personal one, which is a combination from a lot of different sources. Psychological safety for me personally is being able to bring your authentic self, authentic voice into the work that you're doing, and also to be able to decipher what are, what's really directly in front of you, from the goals of the project and the company to your own personal goals, and to have those not be fighting against each other, and of what needs you have to be able to, when I say bring your whole self, it's also, your mental capacity and of what you really need physically and breaks and things like that, and to be comfortable being human in those settings. So a psychological safe team fosters all of that. And for you as a project manager, that is a huge undertaking, and it can be very overwhelming because you are given so much to do with not too much power, right? So you have to be working on influence and all of these different areas, and learning about the unique experiences that individuals are bringing, because everybody, I said this on the AMA, but you're coming into a Zoom or Google Meet, you've got years of trauma, years of professional trauma, personal trauma coming in, and you have to bring all those people together and make a decision or create something together. And that's so much, that's very heavy on PMs that, we're tasked with that, but we don't know that we're tasked with that because that's not a part of the job description. But at the end of the day, it's something that you can start to take responsibility for.
I like that. It's sort of not the official sort of job description. It's not written down anywhere, but it is about creating an environment where people can collaborate. And I really am fond of the idea that it's not just what you do, it's who you are. Bring that as well. The product's going to be richer because of that, because it's, infused with those insights.
Yeah,
but I think it's
exactly.
really important that, like, yes, as project managers, we're bringing, in order to bring people together and sort of suss it all out as human beings, it's important to be able to bring our entire self into that conversation.
Yeah, and the first step, right, is knowing yourself. What are my basic needs? How do I like to communicate? How do I like to work? What's my working style? So, there's a whole lot of, starting off, like, how do I create safety? It's like, well, what makes me feel safe? Like, what do I need? Because, I have to, give my oxygen before I give the oxygen of the person sitting next to me, right? So, so that's like, that is the first baseline of creating any safe team, is like the safety that you need to create inside.
I like that. And is it as simple as that, or more of an ongoing process for you and for the people that you work with, just in terms of sitting down and going, you know what, I need to invest some time just figuring out who I am, and then bringing that into my job? Or how do you constantly build that and revisit it?
Completely. I mean, your core self is probably not going to change over a lifetime of exactly of what you like. Your personality, like, people can take the Myers-Briggs once and then take it again in 5 years and have something a little bit different, but it's like the phase of your life is, but your habits might change. Your obviously your lifestyle and what's happening around you is changing at all times, or hopefully not, but hopefully it's now. I can't wait till we get to boring times. I'm just like, I cannot wait for something boring. And so, those factors are always changing around you too. And in different phases of life, you start to evolve into a different version of yourself, but you still have that core self that makes up, your values and your experiences. Like, that doesn't change, right? It's how you handle and how you show that to others, right? And how you use those and really find those strengths, and then learn how to bring out those strengths of other individuals.
I like that. And I'm just wondering, was there like a moment in time or some kind of trigger that made you start focusing your energy on things like diversity and inclusion, on things like psychological safety?
Yeah. I'll tell just a personal story. So I've battled an eating disorder most of my life, and was, put on a diet at 11 and then just, cyclical nature of body dysmorphia and of self-harm. And, it really came to a forefront a couple of years ago. And I discovered, this school of thought called intuitive eating, right? And it's really based off of listening to your body, joyful movement. There's plenty of resources that I can give on this. If you look up intuitive eating, there's a book on it that I would suggest anyone who is interested in this at all would read. And so that's what really, I started to get into this world of realizing that how completely off-centered a BMI is. And it was created by a white male mathematician who had no intent of using it for what it is being used for today. So and then all of these Eurocentric ideals of body and how it didn't correspond to other Black and brown bodies, and just like, and then not to mention misogyny and like all of these different layers that I had known about, but that I was really able to let in, because I started to do some really deep healing. And the time that I wasn't using to change my body, I wanted to make other changes in the world. So I suddenly had all this brain capacity unlocked for me about 2 or 3 years ago, and still in a healing process. It's not like it happened overnight, but then I was like, oh, diversity and inclusion, like, this is, I just, again, fell into it like I did project management as well. And it was like realizing, oh, these are things that I've been caring about and thinking about all along. And then my, heart and mind opened up, and then I, fell into that.
That's fascinating. And I'm so compelled by this idea of, you start lifting up a layer of an onion, and suddenly underneath is actually the bigger picture of imbalance that we're seeing in everything that we do. Is it about diet? Is it about collaboration? Actually, there's a lot of, assumptions, bad habits, outdated information, outdated ways of working that we've been dealing with without really slowing down and pausing to have a conversation about, is that the right way to do things? But that's it's a deeply personal but very fascinating moment to sort of propel you into this. And then, so like, my understanding is that you are sort of the champion. You've championed diversity and inclusion within your teams. How have you seen that impact the way your teams work and the way your projects work since you started to sort of incorporate some of the things that we've been talking about, embracing failure, incorporating sort of the improv side, maybe some play? How has that sort of impacted the work and how it feels?
Yeah. So, on a individual level, I've had to, once, getting into diversity and inclusion, you're going to fail. I am going to, when I put myself out there, when I try to be curious and explore and play, I'm so glad you brought up that term. When we try to do that, I'm going to have missteps, and not only from my narrow view and experiences and of who my core, identity. People, if you can't see me right now, I am a white woman. And so so just, based around all of these different things, I have to realize that I'm going to fail. And I have so many fail moments that I can think of in D&I, but they were learning opportunities, right? And so I had to, I can't let that stop me though, because I have to keep doing the work. And in those failures, like I said, is where I really start to grow. And when it comes to the teams, what I've found that I've been able to unlock is that, in D&I, there's a lot of this that goes around this a term called tough conversations, or the hard conversations, right? And it's just anyone saying like, hey, you had a racial microaggression towards me the other day, and let's have a hard talk about it. Or, hey, I was in a call with 7 other men and I didn't get credit for an idea and it went to somebody else, and not getting credit is hurtful to me, and not and I need that for professional development, so being able to then facilitate those discussions, because nobody's going to really make any changes if you don't address them, and address them very directly. They have to, be approached in a very gentle and kind and open way that you would expect somebody else. But really making sure we're having those hard conversations, addressing things in the moment, like pretty immediately, not letting things sit and fester and get to somebody's yearly review, so just bringing that up in the immediately but it's scary. It's very scary. And so being able to, it's scary for me, it's scary for others, but saying like, hey, we're going to have these open dialogues and we're going to be uncomfortable, but it's when you're uncomfortable, like I said, that there's really, good evolution for teams and for other people to really learn something about who they're working with, what those needs are, and then maybe that feeds into the world around them too, because what happens at work, you bring it into your life. So how can you really change that all around view?
Absolutely. Like the reverse is also true. We've been sort of making sort of micro movements away from the balance that we need to find, and now we need to sort of rediscover that sort of center again. And yes, it is going to be difficult, but it's this sort of positive discomfort in a way, and microaggressions and microcorrections in a way, so that we can kind of get back there without getting too much further away from where we need to be. That's very cool. I think like the tough conversations, I think tough because of the subject matter, but I also think tough because, like you mentioned, where it can be very fear-inducing to initiate that conversation. Also, on being on the receiving end of that conversation, you might have your sensitivities, might get you on your back foot, and that's kind of like we're afraid to have those conversations. But I mean, what does a successful conversation look like in your books? If you were to say, hey, listen, I felt like I didn't get credit because of my identity in that last call, and you're bringing it up with the folks on the call, what is sort of a sort of happy path outcome for that conversation in your books?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it really, obviously it varies on the person and the nature of what happened, but in most conversations it's like, okay, so I need to get curious around intent, right? Because intent does not always match impact, and in fact it rarely does, to use HR terms. So trying to dig into what can you explain to me what you meant by this, or can you help me understand when this was said or brought up, what was the intention behind it, or I want to open something up if you have questions for me too. And then bringing up specifically, and if it happens in the moment, which is great too, if it happens after the fact, but being very direct, saying, oh, thank you, John, for pointing out that was a good point that I brought up earlier, and that this person helped clarify, or, or if it happens after the fact, just again, being very, very, very specific around what happened, how it impacted you personally. I feel this made me feel, or this did this to me. The personal impact, not this is a fact. You're not a misogynistic, turd, so to speak, not coming at it and not labeling people, not realizing that they're, one action doesn't define them, much like it doesn't define you. But if you see a pattern, you need to stop that pattern, right? Because that pattern can really turn into some toxic behaviors. So just, seeing it in those ways, and getting curious, saying the personal impact, and talking about how to move on from that too, like giving that person a way to know exactly how it's going to be okay, what they can do with this. It gets really messy when you get into power dynamics and a whole lot of, office politics and things like that. But really just, sticking to those core things about yourself, and then, realizing that you're also just doing your best.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. And then you touched on it, but, how about the sideways version of that conversation where, on the receiving end, someone's saying to you, Samantha, you're being silly. That didn't happen at all. I don't know why you're being, why are you being so crazy? Maybe like this is like probably worst case scenario response to that kind of conversation. But, where do you go from there?
Yeah, that sounds like some usual gaslighting that I've seen in a lot of conversations. People, if someone's denying your experience, you just should say that, hey, you're denying what my, perception of this. And, it's actually hurting me worse than the actual action, right? The denial of it, sometimes, what is it? The cover-up's worse than the crime. That you trying to then back away from this and to say, hey, it's okay. Like, trying to release the shame that person's probably feeling, because that is the core of all denial, is that I don't want to face this. I did something wrong. I can't internalize this yet. Someone's not ready to hear that feedback. So again, it's a whole lot of emotional load on you, and you need to start to also recognize when you can do it for other people. And if you see somebody else who's experiencing this, and then maybe you can, help in that way. But you have to say, hey, it's okay that this happens a lot, or I've seen this. This is not the first time. Usually in our, experiences, it's nothing rare that I've seen on a day-to-day basis. But, just being able to stop and say, hey, we're just two humans talking to each other. Please don't deny my experience, and I won't deny yours. I need you to take down that wall for a little bit, and let's just get to this and then move on.
And I think that's why also another layer of why these conversations are tough is because you're in a situation where, a state of psychological tenderness, and then in having the conversation where you felt hurt, you also need to take into account that the person you are bringing this up with is also feeling some hurt or some shame, and managing that so that it gets towards an outcome that is not just, a sort of gaslighting response, or, a denial that ends up in a stalemate.
Right. Yeah. You have to train, when you're with your teams, you're not only training them in how I give feedback, but how do I receive feedback too. Right. Mm-hmm. And you can be really you can really set the great example for how to receive feedback and when you're going to get that, because you might get that on a professional sense, right? You might get some negative feedback, not having to do anything with psychological safety or DNI or mental health or anything for those more sensitive topics. Maybe you just get feedback on, hey, I didn't, the way you presented this, so you fumbled a little bit in your presentation. You didn't do good on this podcast, Samantha. Like, I know you're going to tell me after this. And I'll say, hey, okay, I hear that. I want to learn more about this. Like, what do you like? Let's talk about maybe what I can do for next time. I really appreciate, the gratitude of thank you for coming to me with feedback, because critique is so important and we stray away from it at all times. And it really is actually like how you give negative feedback is such an art. And so to do that in a DNI lens is even more important.
I really want to dive into that, because I think it's really interesting. You think about something like a project team, and it's not necessarily people who all work together every day. They may be coming from different parts of an organization to sort of deliver a product that requires, their cross-functional abilities, their different perspectives. But in other words, you kind of have to create this culture quite quickly. And I'm just wondering what that looks like. You're starting out with a new team. Not everybody's worked together before. Not everybody is sort of at a point where they're going to give you an opportunity to be the good example, because they don't yet feel comfortable telling you that you fumbled during your presentation. How do you sort of get everyone started on, day one or leading up to day one, so that you start building that culture of safety, so that people feel comfortable having those conversations?
Yeah, no, even just writing, it sounds like, there's a couple of different exercises that I have when I first start out with teams, especially new teams and especially remote teams. It's so, so crucial. So I have this team startup that I use where I, ask everybody, what are you really good at? Because I don't, for a lot of people, like, what can you do with your hands behind your back? Like, what are your secret weapons? Like, what's something that you do that's like not within your discipline that people might not know of, like, hey, I'm a designer, but you know what? I also have a development background that I don't talk about a lot. Or, people just will come in with something very random that might have to do with the subject matter at hand. What's your working style? I'm a morning person. I'm what's your personality? Tell me something about yourself. What is your goals? What are your personal goals for the next 6 months? How can I help and foster that? Like I said before, your project goals is probably not going to match someone's personal goals. You got to keep both of those in mind to keep people happy, keep your retention, keep good, healthy teams. Ask people how they like feedback, or how they, talk about something that's happened and maybe an example that they just came off of, right? Some PTSD that they're having from another project or a company, just like start having people give examples, and it's not specific to this team, but it's specific enough where you're learning about them and what they went through and then how they learned from it. And it's going to get better and better as you have retros with your teams and things like that. You make it fun. You make the negative feedback group focused. It's never like whenever I do, start, stop, continues or anything like that. Like, it's not, I want this person to do this. I want the team to do this. I want the team to do this. Or if you're celebrating wins, make it very specific to people too. Like, it's not, so it's like give, give praise in public, give negative feedback in private. And so, just setting up those rules of the road for the team as well, and to say, hey, can we agree on how we're going to work together? There's plenty of team canvas exercises. There's just a plethora, and get people excited to do them. And I know not everybody is going to be happy to be doing something that's not directly the work, but realizing that how we work together is actually way more important than anything that we'll create.
I like that. And I think that's a question that I get a lot, which is like, okay, what parts of the conversation are one-to-one private conversations, and what parts of the conversation are things that we should have as a team because it's also building that culture. So my impression is that sort of getting to know you part, like, leading up to day one with a new team, you're sort of having that conversation with individual team members. How do you like to receive feedback? What are your goals? And it's sort of establishing that relationship. But then there's ceremonies and rituals throughout the project where, as a team, there is an opportunity to have conversations about how things are going and how to improve, and not being sort of specific and not attacking and not being accusatory for individuals, but really thinking of it as team success, but still feeling comfortable enough to sort of have generalized criticisms and feedback about the process so that the team can improve.
Totally. Yeah, it's really important to to start to pull through that as soon as you can. I mean, you'll learn it, as you go too, and you start to actually do the work and be in it. But one thing too that's important that I do also at the beginning with all teams is talk about time off, or if you can't make something, or if something is just not working for you that day, is to be completely honest with me about your mental capacity, or what it's just been in the last we're celebrating a year now in this pandemic officially in the US. I'm sure, I don't know what it's like for y'all over there, but yeah, just telling people that what you need, obviously everyone talks about doctor's appointments and things like that, but even hey, if you need an hour here or there or whatever, or it's just not going to happen for you today, let me know. Let's talk through. I want to help you get to the end of the day and the end of the week, basically. And so I also make that clear. I make sure I direct it with my managers, whoever I'm working with, too, to say, I will just say it out loud too, because I'm usually the one that controls hours and how long and what people are working on and when, and especially if they're just dedicated to me. But I will tell them, hey, I'm going to pull in that autonomy for my team, because I need to make sure that they have what they need to feel like they can walk away from something and be okay. Because a lot of times, you check out at 5 p.m., but it's still on your mind. I want people to have a full life outside of work, and like I said, if you bring your authentic self to work, that's, everything that you can give today. And I want you to be kind with yourself, and in turn, let me know how I can support that.
Awesome. I want to get into remote in a little bit, but first I wanted to ask you about whether you've had any sort of aha moments where you're like, okay, I'm investing this time in creating this environment for my team. And what was that moment where you're like, aha, this is working? This wouldn't have happened if I didn't build up this culture, if I didn't create this environment of psychological safety. It's working.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good one. I would say, recently I've been in a huge technical discovery with a very brand new team that's been working together for 3 months. I just joined them for the last couple of weeks now. And, I've been seeing more and more that as I've been totally I am naive on this project. Let me ask any questions that you need, that you've already asked of the client. So let me be that barrier for you, to reiterate things that have changed, or that you're unclear on because you don't want to look like you weren't listening, or, it's a lot of the team needs a confidence boost. And so as I've been, creating all these workshops for user story mapping and for prioritization, the team has been, I feel more and more open up and asking questions, pushing back on things, wondering, so I've been, feeling the confidence boosted as we start to just kind of open this up and have very frank discussions around how much time this will take and why I think that. And this is my experience. This is, both my experience and also what I know about what you've told me. And so I feel everybody's slowly starting to bring who they are into this. And we're coming to a place where we can say, okay, here's what we're going to build. Here's how long it's going to take. Here's the team that's going to do it. And so, I kind of came into it recently in a team that was just a little bit down. And so both they needed not only the confidence, but the ability to, like I said, be curious and be open and realize that, that you're also, they asked really great questions that created different solutions too, right? That it's not just kind of picking apart what somebody said, you're bringing something very unique and different, and I'm working with a whole lot of smart people and stuff that's also way beyond my technical knowledge. And I'm like, wow, y'all are asking really great. This is really great and really, good questions. And I'm very perky and fun, trying to keep things light. And so I think we've really, they said in a Slack message, we've really turned this ship around. And so just, seeing it in that way and coming, not only it's with fresh eyes, but in a place that's like, hey, everything, we're all okay here. Let's figure this out together. And, I got your back. And that's an improv, motto. I got your back. So just, feeling like it's really clicking for this team.
I like that. And there's two things there that I really want to dig in on. And one is just the fact that, yes, like team morale and how they feel emotionally about a project is so important to everything from the quality of the product to just productivity in general, which I love. And just that other thing was like pushback is such a funny word. And it's probably one of those limitations of the English language, but like pushback is good. It can be good and it can be bad. And there's no real sort of line, I don't think, or clear definition of what good pushback is versus bad pushback. But I love that as an indicator of like, this is working because I'm getting a lot of good pushback from my team, where they're challenging the ideas and they're sort of, they're beating up the idea, not beating up the person who came up with it, but trying to get the best possible thing. They're like challenging and having a culture where that's a good thing versus like bad pushback, I would argue, would be something like, well, I don't have enough information to do what I need to do. I can't do this. I'm blocked.
Yeah.
Like I'm pushing back because, frankly, I just don't want to do the work. Is different from pushing back because you want the work to be really, really good. And I think that's a really good measure.
Yeah, no, it's such a great point to bring in. And it's something I say a whole lot. Like, I love pushback. I don't love it when it's my 8-year-old not wanting to do the dishes, but I do like it when it's teams asking really thoughtful questions, right? There's a great book called Driven by Differences that I first read a couple of years ago. And it also talks about the fact that homogeny never creates anything great, right? And so not only, it's a case for diverse teams and inclusive teams, but also diversity of thought, right? And having something and asking a dumb question, asking an out there question, like asking just asking anything top of mind, like I said, to make sure you're digging into potentially something someone's not thought of yet, not because they don't want to or that they're going to shut it down. You can't be afraid of that because people will say, no, that's not right. Or, I had a big flub the other day where I said something and they're like, no, we're not. Was that not clear? We're not doing that. And I said, oh, okay. It's like, but I'm able to brush it off and say, oh, you know what? You're totally right. You did say that. Here's what I was thinking along that line. Of course, I was red in the face for 30 minutes, but you got to just shake it off. Right. And so, to put yourself out there, you have to foster that culture within a team, and there's team culture and then there's company culture. And so that's what you can really, start to create for yourself.
I don't want to get there too, but first I wanted to zero in on what you're talking about earlier. Just you're working with teams that are fully remote right now, and I imagine that it's probably a little bit different trying to create psychologically safe environments for your team in person than it is for virtual teams, and I'm imagining that it's a little bit different. There's other considerations now, even if you've already been, sort of creating these safe environments for your team virtually. Now we're also in a pandemic, so there's this sort of additional layer. But coming back to, that conversation of like, okay, like setting a baseline and having these team conversations where, we're creating, or we're sort of talking about how to improve and giving one another feedback. And is there anything that you sort of add to that or change when that's a fully virtual team, not being able to sort of necessarily pick up on all the cues and maybe feeling a little bit just out of sorts and maybe just offensive as a result of just, being at your kitchen table and not with these people as we're having these, conversations?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that I would say is just a lot of personal check-ins, like not so many personal meetings and one-on-ones, but I just ask people a lot, hey, what are you feeling right now? What did you think about that meeting? Without giving my opinion first too, because a lot of times people will just like, slack something like that was bad, that was horrible, and it's like, you know what I not, if I want to share how I feel, I will, at a later time, but most important, I need to gauge what everyone else is thinking right now. So leaving, very open-ended questions, not, did you think that went horrible or do you disagree? Like not like that. But just having, not being afraid to have all of those check-ins. The other thing that I think that is, with the remote team, it's very hard to read faces and to make sure, like, I share my camera a whole lot. I encourage other people, and I haven't had too many team sessions, mostly client sessions where people stop sharing their video, which can be hard. But I also understand too, because maybe somebody is in an environment where they don't want to share their video, or they've got something else going on, or they're double, I want to focus, but I also I can only make it as important as somebody's going to take it too. And other people, and realizing that other people, like, I can say like, hey, it would be so great if everybody could give, the full attention to this. I want you to be able to be fully present. If I have to say that, I will, but other than that, I have to assume that people are can get distracted, and that's okay, because I do as well too. So just like either setting a baseline for I need your full attention, or realizing that most people aren't going to be giving that. And then, the last thing too is just, I had a coworker who lost her dog a couple weeks ago, and she just was, like, okay, and I'll be back tomorrow. And I was like, girl, don't, you're not going to be back tomorrow. And don't do that to you. No. Like, take some more time. You lost something very important. And for, she was like, no, I'll be, and she had just started as well. So she was new to the company. So it's also like, you don't have to prove anything. Like, you're okay. Take some more time. And that's, and realizing of what I would feel or will feel, when an animal passes, and trying to really, gauge into that empathy and to say, what would I want to hear at that moment? Like, no, just take some breathing room and space and time. And yeah, so just making sure that it's clear for people. If you feel a sense of that somebody's not, sharing, digging into that, but again, keeping it one-on-one, keeping it personal, sharing from your own perspective too, and what's going on with you. Everyone in stand-ups, every morning I ask, how you feeling? Every morning. How are you feeling? What'd you do yesterday? What'd you do today? Any blockers, right? What I start sharing very candid, how am I feeling? And then everyone else starts sharing very candid, how are they feeling? Because we, trust each other as teams, even new teams that just met. But if you share, if you're vulnerable, you probably will get it back.
Yeah, really, see that importance of being an empathetic leader, especially when working remote. Just being that example, which is not easy, right? It's not easy to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, and sort of embracing your own failure, constantly. But it also, like, just to kind of clarify from earlier, yes, there are things you can do, like have these conversations, have these sessions, to sort of start building this culture. But the most important part is sort of being that person every day and leading the team every day in a way that reinforces that safety, so that they can say, I'm not feeling great. I need some time, I need some space, or, to give their genuine feedback about how something went at any given time. And just seeing examples of that all the time, especially when they can't be in person, to sort of see facial expressions. Like, you raise a really good point, which is like the check-ins. So when we're all in person, you go to that meeting and it's a client meeting, you've got to put your professional face on. The face you make after you leave that meeting is probably how you feel. And when we were all there, I'd be like, oh, you look like that went totally sideways. Like, how did you feel? But you don't have that remotely. Everyone kind of hangs up. And maybe there's a team debrief, but you don't have that opportunity to like see someone in the hall and go, wow, you look kind of down, like what's been going on. So I love that notion of a check-in that's not necessarily like, hey, at 3 p.m. I'm going to send you an invite for a check-in and we're going to have a meeting about it. But it's like a more casual, yes, remote, but still very sort of intimate in a way, check-in, just to see how people are doing emotionally, because we can't really, walk by their desk and see that they have a stressed face on.
No, yeah, that's such a good point. You don't get that immediate reactions, and you can kind of see it when people are maybe on calls and they grimace or something like that. But it's so hard, and I say this on probably every interview or anything that I talk about is MRI. Most respectful interpretation. So I will take this. I say this to myself literally every day, and and it is, I will read into Slack messages. They didn't have 5 exclamation points like I usually do. I will, you'll read into tone, and I have to say, I have to have the most respectful interpretation of whatever came at me, realizing that person could be in a bad mood. They could have something going on. If they have direct feedback from me, they will give it. Like I trust that if I feel like some passive aggressive behavior, I trust someone will come to me, and if they don't, that's their problem, not mine. So I will have the most respectful interpretation of anything that I deem to be slightly negative, to say maybe they're having a human moment. Maybe what I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened a minute before they walked into this, or or whatnot. But like I have to think. Is that me? I'm gonna silence that. Apologies.
It's okay. What is it? I actually can't hear it.
Oh, it was Slack.
Oh, that's okay.
Make sure it wasn't on.
It wasn't out loud.
Yeah. So, most respectful interpretation, 1,000%. That is something I say every day. The other thing too that I repeat to myself that is on a Post-it that my therapist said is allow people to be where they are. Allow people to be where they are. I love this. It's helped me with some, let's just call it political disagreements within family. And it's, just like, okay, it's okay if they're not at the place that I wanted them to be right now too. And that like, if the team is not gelling in happy hour and excited to be there, it's okay. It's okay. Like I have, my own hopes for where someone would be, and I have to allow them to be where they are.
Especially as like project managers, where we're like hardwired to solve problems. And sometimes that person maybe doesn't want the solution given to them. They just kind of need to be where they're at and then get through it. I think that's massive.
Yeah. I saw a good tweet the other day it was for relationships, but it was something that said like, this has changed my marriage. If someone's upset, I ask them, hey, do you need comforting, or do you want a solution? Like, do you want a rant, or do you want me to tell you what I think you should do? You can even ask that if somebody's going through something crazy, like, hey, do you just want, a sounding board for this, or what do you really need? Because those are probably the 2 options. And maybe that you want to do that with other people too. Like if, again, you shouldn't maybe be back channeling so much. I'm not trying to encourage that. But if you want to, rant around something within your personal life or professional life, or just share something that you're upset about, and just say like, hey, I'm not looking for solutions. I'm just looking for some comfort.
Mm-hmm. I like that these are all kind of like human optimizations in a way, right? There are these things that we like, why wouldn't we just talk about it? For decades and decades and decades, we've just been letting it happen and not talking about it, and not just having the hard conversations or asking the pointed questions. And I find like, especially even with like remote, right? Where, we need to kind of create these situations where, we can't just kind of guess and make assumptions and feel our way through it. We just don't have time, and we don't have enough sort of contact with one another to do that. So this sort of directness in communication is actually part of the key to be able to really just overcome some of the challenges that we're facing, and some of the imbalance that we're facing, things that are, not inclusive, things that are not very democratic in what we do. Just having those, even if they're micro conversations, but having direct conversations in a respectful way that accounts for, in an empathetic way that accounts for how the recipient of that information could feel, actually just kind of fast forwards you like so far,
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like,
I know
why would
that's
we play
as
games?
yeah. Yeah, there, like you said, like I love that there's no room for assumptions right now. We have to be very clear, and we have to be extremely intentional with our messages, what we're saying, and it can be also exhausting. And it's not gonna be the perfect, like I said, intent versus impact. You're not gonna have the same impact that maybe you were hoping for or going for. I find sometimes too, writing like a script for yourself is helpful. If you have a point to make with a client, or you have to something, sensitive to bring up, like I said, do it quickly, do it pretty fast, like if you can. But if you have to have a separate conversation, maybe give yourself 5 minutes, jot in a note stock or a voice memo. Just like say it to yourself a little bit, because like you said, in a remote setting, there's too many ways you can go, and we just were so disconnected.
Absolutely. And I love that. Something we always kind of come back to in various conversations is like, we prepare so much for certain things, right? Like a pitch, and things go well. And then we do something else and it doesn't go well because we didn't prep. And I think it might be not an obvious thing to a lot of people until you think about it, that you're like, yeah, maybe I should have prepped to have that tough conversation, or maybe even that not so tough conversation. We have that ability to sort of plan in advance. I love that notion of having a script, so you can kind of really think through how it's going to go, if it's going to be, important for anyone, for your team, for your client, for, loved ones. There's things we can learn about our own sort of ability to prepare. We do it for lots of things, and we don't do it for others. It's very, it's a very odd thing.
Yeah, no, you can do, and like any good, PM, right? If you're going to take good notes, like you're going to have data points, you're going to have decisions, or maybe, suggestions around something that's going to be more subjective. So, just like organizing those thoughts in a little bit of a structured way can really help.
And can be applied to, like things like diversity and inclusion, how we can get better at making it more widespread. Which is, I think I do want to go there, actually, because in my head, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, okay, how does it feel to be on a project team with Samantha Schak? It feels pretty cool. But then in an agency environment or any organization where, that might not be your only thing, and suddenly you walk out of that door, our virtual door, and you go to your other project team, or, you're working on other work. I'm just wondering how you approach that, whether this is like Sam's personal style, or if your ultimate goal is to have that cascade into organizational culture, and if so, like how and is it working?
Yeah, it's definitely, personal style, and something that I make very well known, right? It's like, if you're going to work with me, these are the ways that I like to, these are the values that I adhere to: the people, the process, and the product. Like, especially the people, but even in inclusive products now are becoming more and more the norm, and praised, and not just, diverse stock photography. It's like, is this accessible? Who is this made for? What are we, all of these, what is the unintentional harm that this could cause? So, there's so many questions that we can go into this, but that, like I said, can foster some like great innovation. When it comes to, companies, I always, try to, I've tried to create a D&I pilot program at a previous company, or I've tried to just, push it to be more widespread. But really it has to come from the top. So I make sure anywhere that I'm at has that as a core value. And I was telling my team, I said, the only reason I responded to your recruiter was because he had D&I in his title on LinkedIn as an advocate. And I said that I get messages from recruiters plenty of times, but I said that, and we have to, quantify those metrics and like really understand all of that data. And I'm very fortunate that I'm at a company currently right now that takes it very seriously and has D&I roundtables and hallway talks and but sends out also surveys so they can gain data points, not just in feedback, but in measuring it and in their recruitment tactics and things like that, how they write job descriptions. I mean, so I'm right now not lifting the load by myself because everybody owns diversity and inclusion. And I have felt that in the past, and I don't feel it now. So, I don't have like advice for that outside of just make sure, if you can, make sure an organization that you're at is focused on that. But if anything, just, if it's in your project team and people see that you can really create teams that can collaborate, work well together, under this lens, it'll filter out into other things. And I've had people ask me, how do I run this? Or what am I doing in this way? What questions did I ask here? So, it will bleed out, but it's about whether you're starting from the top or the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like that sort of being the example as well, not just for your team, but outside of that team as well. And I'm imagining that even in an organization that has diversity and inclusion in their values, you'll still run up against individuals who will either, have that sort of bad kind of pushback, like, they're rolling their eyes at, Sam's Kumbaya workshop, or even like on a more extreme level, like the people who are going to take advantage of it. They're going to be like, oh, well, I can work whatever hours I want. So I'm just going to not do my work, watch Netflix, because, diversity and inclusion allows me to do this, right? Like, I'm bringing my whole authentic bag of popcorn to my job. How do you sort of approach some of those situations? People who are really sort of, you feel like they're resisting or not buying in, or people who are really sort of trying to cheat the system?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people who are not bought in, and especially being in the agency setting, and a lot of, people who are too cool for school, as I call them. And I'm very much just like you said, a kumbaya, very dorky individual, not cool. So I can stick out like a sore thumb for sure when it comes to like very chic and posh agencies. So what I have done before when I face any sort of resistance in that way is just trying to connect on a personal level to like what that person might be interested in, or where I can like bring them into conversations and and just like realize that like, hey, join the party. Like, it's way more fun when you're in it and, like can let go of the ego a little bit. And so, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do like, say like, hey, we're going to do something kooky. Just like bear with me for a little bit. Just calling it out that it's weird. And I want to do this goofy warm up with y'all, or get everybody, before we go into this, like, we're going to do this dumb improv exercise, and it's really dumb, but you know what? Here's what it's going to help us do. And here's the data for it. Like, it's going to expand your mind. It's going to get rid of your constraints. It's going to, like all of these things, like showing them exactly the why behind the how, the what, and like making it like very clear that, hey, you're not like, I want you to be happy and healthy and productive just as much as anything else. Like, if this isn't working for you, like, I also don't want to force someone into something that they don't want to do. But 9 times out of 10, it's just like, I just need to check my ego at the door. So, just, trying to call things out, pointing to, like I said, pointing to the why and any data that I can find behind it too. Like, I will like post in a general channel, like, hey, here's how improv helped Deloitte, like work through organizational structures, and like, look at that. That's pretty cool. And, so having it come from a source other than myself is something that's been helpful too.
I love that sort of pointing to the data. And also, I'm wondering, is there a way that you measure diversity and inclusion in your teams?
On the team level, that, it's, I would say it's more measured right now by the products that we're creating and what went into it. And, obviously accessibility is a low hanging fruit there. But like, what exercises did we do to, to get to a better place with this, or what did we do with persona work that we didn't think of before? Like, how are we opening up this around? We're not designing it for an ideal 30-year-old able-bodied white person, like we're thinking about it in these different ways of what the perception of this product will be, and then within the team itself, it's team morale and happiness, right? Like that's what inclusion is for them. Mental health is a huge part of inclusion that we don't talk about enough. And so like I don't know, measuring it specifically now is a lot harder. It's a lot easier at a company level, and I know my current company does do that.
So I have one last question that I think is probably weighing on some of our listeners' mind, which is, this all kind of sounds very expensive. Like, how do you approach budgets for having these, team workshops? Are you bringing that to your clients and saying, like, this is part of how we build our team to be performant? Or is it something that's kind of just you do internally and, it's covered internally, and it's not like necessarily a line item or it's like an item in your statement of work?
That's a good question. I haven't billed for, like doing an improv workshop or anything like that specifically for client work in my life in the agency world. It's more, so any meeting I go into, I come into it with these principles of inclusion and safety. And so I don't care if it's a stand-up, if it's a client meeting, I come in and realize, like, first of all, I take control of the meeting. Like, I am driving this discussion. I created the agenda. I'm going to create how we talk to each other. I'm going to create, like I said, creating this culture, right? So it should be ingrained in every single thing that you do. And you're not going to get people trusting you and wanting to come to you with feedback if you're not creating it at a very consistent level. Because people will see if it's not consistent, it's probably not authentic. So in every single thing I do, I don't care if it's a design solutioning workshop or a kickoff or anything like that, or a demo. Anything we come into, I try to bring in that energy, check people, and making sure people know that I'm not afraid to call things out if I see it, because I will stand up for anyone just within meetings. Again, I'll use my best judgment in that, but yeah, it should be something that is a layer of everything that you do in any time you're working with other people.
I really like that it's woven in.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of thinks that it's on top, but it's not a thing. It's actually like how you do the rest of the things,
right?
And that consistency of it that actually makes the biggest difference.
And you're going to find your own style for these things, or how you want to look at it. But what I suggest that people do is diversify who you're following on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, however you consume media. Like, diversify that list, because your language will change, how your tone, how you talk about things. You're going to learn more experiences from individuals that you don't have to ask someone specifically, hey, can you tell me about your culture, or what it's like to have a neurodivergent child, or what like you can ask people and get into that, but really, like, opening up your worldview and like having a diverse set of people that you follow and consume from is really important. And that's where I get like a lot of ideas from, or changes to what I do, how I talk in Slack or anywhere else. So just having it be a constant thing that you're consuming and trying to hone in on. And then, like I said, just connecting with yourself. I'm a big extrovert and, very outspoken and bubbly, but like, you will have your own style within this. But just know that at the end of the day, I want PMs to feel, empowered to take the reins of this, and that, you can really, make a difference. Every PM that I've met is extremely emotionally intelligent and has, really great instincts. Like, you got into this for a reason. And project managers are people managers, and you can really help people grow, and in turn, you're going to make the company grow exponentially and hopefully be rewarded for it.
Love that. And actually, really nice counterpoint to what we were saying at the beginning. Don't let the algorithm define you and put you in a box. I really like that notion of, okay, yeah, get out there and sort of explore other diverse lived experiences so that the algorithm is actually putting that stuff in front of you. Because we were talking earlier in the podcast, the beginning of the podcast, about, how TikTok's algorithm can diagnose you, but equally it could be the thing that brings diverse lived experiences to your front door, day in and day out. I really like that. Very cool.
It casts a wide net, and you never know what you're going to get back. And just reading, there's just a million different ways to live and a million different types of lived experiences. And you're not going to be able to understand everything and be perfect, like I said. So you're going to fail. So just be gentle, kind, and, have some fun.
100%.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sam, these insights are all super valuable. I think the one that really blew my mind, though, is something you actually just touched on earlier in our conversation, which was I've always been thinking of it as embracing failure and then also diversity and inclusion as kind of being like partners in this. But you said something earlier. You said embracing the fact that you're failing at D&I. And I think that's so on point in the sense that actually, you know what? You don't really get there necessarily. We're all just getting better and better. It's continuous improvement. Diversity and inclusion is not a destination, it's a journey, and we all kind of suck at it and we'll continue to suck at it, and because we think we suck at it, that's going to help us get better and better and better at this. But that was just like, it just kind of clicked for me that yes, embracing failure, sure, like I fumbled a meeting and I'm blushing, but also embracing the fact that every day, in some way, we fail at diversity and inclusion. And the goal should just be to incrementally get better and better and better, and hopefully never reach a point where we're like, yeah, I'm done.
Right. And you're never going to get there if you don't try, if you don't have, hard conversations, open yourself up to feedback and to giving feedback. So it's really like, you got to start it tomorrow, though, or start it today. Start it right now.
Start now. Do it now. Awesome. I had one closing question, which might be a can of worms, but I think it's thematically related. And I just thought I'd ask, if there's anyone who has found themselves in a work environment that's actually really psychologically unsafe or toxic, what would you recommend that they do?
That is so hard. It's hard. It's so hard to take on so much, right? When it depends if it's just an individual, or if it's an entire organization, and you're probably going to encounter both in your life. So, if it's an individual, it's, giving them some grace, realizing, okay, what human moments are they having? What, not taking that on though, not realizing it's your job. It's not your job to fix someone else or to give them that, emotional education and to really turn them around, asking for, help from other people in that way. But if it's an organizational culture that's really toxic and bringing you down, it's time to leave. I'm personally volunteering. I try to help PMs all over by looking at resumes, by seeing what connections I have, and there's plenty of PMs like me out there, or strategists, or any, product managers, anyone who wants to help in this way, because I don't want anyone to be in that place where they feel unsafe. So I understand it's a privilege to be able to quit a job, and people are looking all the time. So many women left the workforce. So many, it did open up a can of worms. Goodness, no. But I would just say, use whatever resources you have, build your tribe, build your community. And, I'm sure the digital project manager has, some great resources on this, and how to find new jobs, look at your resume, and always happy to talk about, personal branding. Maybe we could do that at another time too.
Oh, yes.
Or I know, you just had a conversation on personal branding too. So, really making sure that you're always building that up. And taking the leap to leave, because realizing your mental health is more important than anything.
Awesome. Yeah. All sound advice. Perfect. Sam, Thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great having this conversation. You're right, there is so much to this, and I would love to continue diving deeper. Lots of different topics that we can cover. Again, great having you on the DPM Experts team. I'm really looking forward to just continuously collaborating with you and just jamming on ideas like this. So again, just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Galen. It's so great to, chat with you. This is obviously something that's such a passion of mine that I could talk about for a long, long time, and that I want other PMs to start integrating every day. So whatever I can do to help in that way, I'm, happy to provide and happy to get feedback and learn too, because I want to know what you're doing or what I should do better. So really, I'm so excited to be a part of this community.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to doing more of this with you.
All right, thanks. Bye.
So what do you think? What strategies do you have in place for supporting psychological safety within your team environments? What's been working for you? What hasn't been working for you? Tell us a story. Have you ever been on a team that has had a toxic culture? What were the results? Alternatively, what is the safest you've ever felt in a team environment? And what made it feel so safe? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more and get ahead in your work, come and join our tribe with DPM membership. Head over to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/membership to get access to our members forum, mastermind mentorship groups, our library of mini courses, our live mentorship sessions, our Ask Me Anything sessions with a variety of experts, our ebooks, templates, and more. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and stay in touch on thedigitalprojectmanager.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.